Welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile telephones be turned to silent or switched off altogether. Thanks very much. My name is Councillor Westholt and I chair this committee meeting. I will start by introducing my fellow councillors. To my left on the horseshoe table is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Shima Abuki, Councillor Sophie Torney, our Mayor, Councillor Michael Nolan, Councillor Felicity Sinfield. And on my right-hand side, Councillor Mal Osborne-Smith, Councillor Rob Ballier, Councillor Fred Pereira, and Councillor Chris Pattis. Tonight, I acknowledge the presence up here of Coordinator Governance, Ms. Kirsten Ritchie, on my left, and Director Urban Living, Mr. Scott Walker, on my right. There are other officers here tonight as well, and they'll be introduced as they present stuff. Some general information to start off with. The Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel to enable public viewing of these proceedings. The meeting is also being recorded for release on the YouTube as soon as possible after this meeting. The primary purpose of this meeting, the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting, is to deal with matters to do with the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. This committee has delegated powers to make decisions on behalf of Council. For those presenting this evening, when it comes to the agenda item, it will first be presented by an officer. I will then call you one by one to come forward to address the committee. If you're making submission, please present your viewpoint clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose what is before you tonight. Please do not, if you wouldn't mind, repeating what earlier speakers have said, and keep the submission focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. That's not a huge number. We thought there might be more tonight, but that might be particularly important if this runs for quite a while this evening. And I would also believe that if it starts to drag on, the councillors will probably limit their questioning. That should not be seen as a lack of interest in this topic. There is a great deal of interest and embedded interest in this topic. If you're opposed to the matter tonight, please tell the committee why you disagree and might suggest alternatives approaches which might satisfy you. Please focus on your concerns. There are other matters of history or details in the officer's report. I don't think we're going to run into this tonight, but I understand that the Tranche 2 consultation is about to commence, and tonight is all about Tranche 1. And to be fair to those that have joined us for Tranche 1, we will stick to Tranche 1, and anything raised on Tranche 2, I would ask you to hold your peace on that. Thank you very much. There will be other occasions. There's a strict 3-minute limit for all speakers, and that will include councillors. As chair, I can vary that, but probably won't tonight. At the 2.5-minute mark, we'll ring the bell, which indicates you've got 30 seconds to complete your presentation. For those in the gallery this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to remind you to extend due courtesy and respect to each other and to the committee as a whole, and to refrain from any inappropriate behaviour or comments. And just to finish, I would like to encourage all submitters, officers and councillors to speak directly into the microphone, as this will ensure that everyone can hear you clearly. I will now move to apologies. Ms. Ritchie, are there any apologies this evening?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, there is one apology. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. We'll now move to adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee held on the 6th of October. I'm seeking a motion from the floor to move those minutes. Coming up. Right. Thank you. It's not coming up on the screen. So, Councillor Abuki.
Happy to move the adoption of the minutes. Thank you.
And a seconder. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Happy to second, thank you.
Anyone opposed? I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much. Declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors or council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that you wish to foreshadow for the meeting and the agenda tonight? There are none. Thank you. We can now move into the body of the meeting. Tonight, we're dealing with the Victorian Government Activity Centre program, Phase 2 consultation, which deals with Hawthorn, Glenferrie, Auburn and Kew areas. Tonight, this report will be presented by Charles Wonder, the Manager, City Futures. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform the Urban Planning Delegated Committee of the consultation on Tranche 1 of the State Government's Train and Tram Zone Activity Centres program. This report relates to Phase 2 consultation on the Hawthorn, Glenferrie, Auburn and Kew Junction activity centres and highlights the key concerns and issues identified by officers. It seeks in principle endorsement of the draft submission, which is at Attachment 8, which is to be finalised and submitted to the Department of Transport and Planning by the 24th of October. We do note, as the Chair pointed out, that Phase 1 consultation on Tranche 2 centres, which are Ashburton and a combined Riversdale and Willesden Station Centre, commenced today. This is a separate consultation and not the subject of this report, but officers will report on the consultation and planning for these centres at future UPDC meetings. The Phase 2 consultation is seeking feedback on selected draft plans and other elements that will inform the activity centre plans and planning controls. We note that the final complete plans are not proposed to be put out for consultation by the Department of Transport and Planning, and they have indicated that this is the last opportunity for the community to provide input. Consultation commenced on the 10th of September with the release of maps and other materials for community feedback. On the 22nd of September, additional technical and explanatory information was provided to Council. The online survey for community feedback closed yesterday, Sunday the 19th of October, and Council has been given until this Friday, the 24th of October, to provide its submission. The draft submission at Attachment 8 is structured around 5 themes. The first 2 are commentary on the program and process. The next 2, around methodology and outcomes, are the focus for where council officers are seeking alternative approaches. And the last section raises issues that we're seeking to be further investigated or included in the final plans and controls. The review of the DTP consultation material is based on principles of change and place-specific planning work that is being developed by Council. I just will highlight a couple of key issues raised in the submissions. The first being shifting from standardised typology-based approach, which the department is adopting, that delivers a generic response, to a place-based approach that recognises the unique qualities and context of these activity centres. Second, the revision of catchment boundaries to properly reflect walkability and heritage constraints. And the third, and these are by no means all the issues that we have raised, is the changes to various proposed built form outcomes, including building heights, but noting that heights cannot be considered in isolation of other built form controls. Now, the submission was published as part of the agenda for this meeting as a work in progress draft. There will be adjustments, but it's not proposed to add substantive new issues. Throughout the submission and at the end, Council's key asks are summarised. There's an appendix which captures all of them. And the first and overarching ask is that the department meets with Council to discuss the issues raised in the submission and collaborates with Council on the development of the final activity centre plans and planning controls based on the place-based planning and development frameworks that are being developed by Council officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks indeed. Tonight in our gallery we have 8 people who have indicated they wish to make submissions. 2 are against the motion as it currently shows, 1 is unsure and 5 support it. Once I've announced your name, please come forward and join us at the horseshoe table. And if someone is not present or is left for some reason, I'll move on directly to the next speaker. I'll remind you again that there's a strict 3-minute limit for your presentations, and I'd ask you to start with the name and the suburb in which you live. So tonight we'll start with Anna Adamson Pinaski, and I apologised if that's incorrectly pronounced.
I'm right. Thank you.
Welcome.
I believe that Q, for a start, should not be under the
Excuse me,
high
can I
density
just for the, from the
level,
recording.
because
She's hard of hearing.
Oh, my apologies.
Do you want to ask her first?
Yeah, I just said to start off, would you mind starting, just for the recording, would you mind starting with name and the suburb in which you live?
Can you start with the name and the suburb that you live?
okay. My name's Anna Adamson Pincheski. I live in Kew in the Studley Park ward.
Thank you.
Can I start now? Yeah. Okay, sorry. I've never done this before. For a start, I don't think the Kew, with the Kew Junction, even though we do have trams and buses, we don't have a train station. Now, the state government can't afford to put a train station in, and where would you put it? So therefore, that's one of the reasons I don't think Kew should be in the high density area. I also think that we have a council and that the state government shouldn't try to take over the job of a council and railroad us into something that we really don't need. Yes, I know we need housing, but Australia is a big country. It doesn't have to be high density everywhere, because we've got high density around us all over the place. We have high density in Richmond. We have high density in Collingwood. We have high density in Abbotsford. We have high density in Carlton. We have high density in Fairfield. Now, some areas should be left as green areas, areas where nature can have its way without destroying the environment, without destroying the heritage overlay to these areas. And I'm not talking just about Victorian or Edwardian homes. There's also modern homes, the 60s and brutalist homes, that gives the area its feeling, it gives the area its special environment. And I feel that with the high density, I also used to live in Carlton. I worked in Carlton for 50 years, and it really brings a lot more crime into the area, and that we can see by our figures now, the crime is increasing rapidly around Kew, Hawthorn, and all these places where usually there wasn't that much crime as there is now. So, no, I do not approve, and I think council should be allowed to make these decisions and not be railroaded in by a state government that doesn't even know what it's doing.
Thank you for your presentation. Councillors, are there any questions of this submitter? Councillor Rabuki.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alaminski. So we are discussing today whether we're going to authorise our officers to submit the report, which is a response to the planning changes. Do you accept the officer's recommendation?
Accept the officer's recommendation, but he doesn't accept the recommendation.
No, I don't.
Sorry, say that again.
No, you don't.
The officer's recommendation goes through a lot of the items around which council is dissatisfied with the process by which.
Sorry, I'll just explain.
I also think there's a problem, another problem that I haven't spoken about, parking and
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Hearing, that's
Oh, okay. So what we are discussing tonight is this agenda item. So we need to speak to that agenda item. So what I'm interested in knowing is whether you support our officer's recommendation in their response.
I don't believe she does. She's a bit
She doesn't accept the officer's recommendation.
he's my son, he knows what I think.
All right, thank you very much.
I've heard it enough, so.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for presenting tonight.
Thank you very much.
You never had, Mum?
Thank you, Morty. Thank you for listening to me.
Next up is Tristan Danino. Thank you. Just to remind you, if you could start with you pronouncing your name and the suburb in which you live, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Tristan Danino, close enough, and I live in Hawthorne East. I've got some notes on my phone, so excuse me if I'm not making eye contact. But yeah, I strongly disagree with the submission and the points raised in the submission. A little bit about me, I'm a 28-year-old primary school teacher. I live in Hawthorne East. And I also notice I'm by far the youngest person in the room, so I think I speak for my generation as well. Oh, sorry. I'm a little bit younger than him, I think. Sorry. But yeah, as a young person, especially as someone deeply concerned about climate change and the cost of living, I firmly support the government's plans, and thus I am against the council's submission to those government plans. Whilst I think generally, I know that you are supportive of more housing more generally, and I know that there's a lot of great sustainability initiatives going on, I really believe that council must be much more ambitious than we are currently. Frankly, in my perspective, we've had generations to deal with these issues and to be ambitious, and many councils, not just Burundara, have not done that. And I think there's time for a change, and I really believe that those planning controls are better rested with the minister who is more ambitious and willing to actually address the issues that face people of my age and my generation. On the council's questioning of the program's legitimacy, I noted that there were two questions about the need for urgency, and that they also asked for evidence of efficacy. On the topic of urgency, there couldn't be more urgency. I think it's plain to see. We have the climate crisis as well as some of the world's most affordable housing in this LGA and in Melbourne. So both of those things are plain as day. That urgency cannot wait a day longer. We cannot wait for 5 more councils and 10 years of consultation. Incredible unaffordability is also a direct result of the planning controls in government areas such as Burundara's, which the council's submission does not address at all. They make no commitment as to how these will be improved. And especially according to reputal to institutes such as the Grattan Organisation, these policies can be contrasted with governments in New Zealand and Europe who have densified and who have made a sustainable and sufficient change for housing affordability. And the council's submission, to my mind, doesn't address any of those concerns. On a personal level, I moved to Hawthorne for good public transport and for the lifestyle here. You know, it's a beautiful suburb with so much to offer and a great council, I think, overall. And I would really love to buy a house here one day and raise a family, but that is so out of my financial wheelhouse. I spend a third of my rent my income as a primary school teacher on rent. And I respectfully disagree with those who would, to me, it feels like a lot of the time heritage is prioritized over the needs of young people like myself and people who are unable to afford housing. So I would ask those people to consider that I understand Australia is changing. I think I'm the face of that as a non-white person living in this suburb.
Mr. Danino, could you move to wrapping up at this point in time?
Yes,
Thanks very much.
I'm on my last point. But I would encourage you to think about the benefits that this can bring in terms of living closer to your family, in terms of the climate crisis, and in terms of people like me being able to afford housing in this beautiful area. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there questions? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Nini, for your presentation, and it's wonderful to see a person of your age here and presenting this evening. And I certainly understand the plight of housing affordability. I just wanted to ask you, you live in Hawthorne East. You said you're hoping to purchase a property. Are you currently renting?
Yes, with 4 people.
Right, right. Have you observed any apartments, and we have quite a few high-rise developments in the Hawthorne East area. Many buildings are only, 5 years old, if that, some are newer. Have you identified anything that you would consider to be affordable?
Honestly, I haven't looked because it just feels like winning the lottery is more likely. But no, and I think the statistics on housing affordability in our suburb back that up, that for most people like me on a government, entry-level government wage, it's totally unaffordable. And even with the increase in housing stock, I think it would still be quite hard, but that's the only meaningful change that we need.
Yes, yeah, and again, I agree with you. And ideally, there would be a situation where multi-level apartments, do become affordable, and I wish you all the best in your future. Just one follow-up question, if I may. You touched on the importance of climate action and recognition of the seriousness of identifying homes that support climate initiatives. Would you agree that it would be appropriate for all new construction to comply with the National Construction Code, to be compliant with the ESD, the Environment and Sustainable Design Guidelines, and that there is no compromise of apartment design?
I understand that you're referring to as well the fact that in the planning controls changes, some of those environmental procedures have been taken out. Am I correct and that's what you're alluding to?
Yes.
I absolutely agree that the climate crisis is of utmost importance, but I also believe that on the balance of it, I don't support reducing those controls, but on the balance of it, if it's a choice between building 500,000 houses in Pakenham where everybody drives and nobody has any access to public transport, and a few houses in Burundara that are slightly less energy efficient, I think for me the choice is clear. And in terms of quality of life as well in Burundara, compared to I work in Pakenham doing disability support work sometimes, and there's no compromise. And those climate objectives for me are better met with densification in this area, even at the expense of slighting, especially in terms of affordability. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Councillor Ibuki.
Thank you, Mr. Danino. I'm just interested in hearing from you how you feel or how you've got the impression that council might be resistant or is not supporting the call for more housing. I thought that we were dissatisfied with the level of or the lack of engagement and cooperation and collaboration. So could you please let me know how specifically you're not supporting the officer's recommendation because you feel that we are not supporting the need for more housing?
Absolutely. I recognise that you are supportive of more housing. I think that's sort of a general baseline understanding of all of us in this discussion. But from my perspective, as I mentioned, I'm quite interested in this topic as well, and I've seen the last 50, 60 years, councils have said, yes, we're supportive, we just want collaboration, and forgive me if it sounds cynical, but I just don't believe that that's actually going to lead to meaningful change. Personally, I want meaningful and ideally legally binding targets that lead to outcomes, rather than consultation that takes 5 years in an environment where we can't wait another day for more housing.
Okay, thank you, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you. You noted just there about legally binding targets. One of the criticisms that has been made of the current approach is that there are no mandatory inclusion zoning targets for affordable housing in this plan, and affordability seems to be one of your key issues. In that context, why are you supporting something that simply addresses supply and doesn't seem to address affordability?
That's a good question. I do actually agree with you that there should be mandates for affordable housing, especially in light of the Victorian government's approach when it has been to public housing, for example, and all the ways that they've reduced that stock over time. But I also do think that actually supply is the issue, and supply and planning controls are the issue. And from my perspective, affordable housing isn't just a subset of houses. It should be all houses. And the best way to do that is to change in planning laws, which my understanding is that Burundara is not supportive of to an extent, and also a massive increase in supply, because that's the only thing that we need to have more people in homes.
So your thesis is that should we reduce red tape and increase supply, prices would drop, yet studies out of Wellington in New Zealand, cited by the Yes in My Backyard movement, has shown that increasing densification hasn't actually increased affordability. It's increased the number of units available, but it hasn't affected the price point at which those units are for sale, because it's missing a mandatory inclusionary zoning aspect. Have you any sense of how many permits Burundara has issued, planning permits Burundara has issued, that have led to new buildings being completed?
I know that it's about an average of 600 new dwellings per year in the last 6 years, which is, to me, grossly inadequate. And I understand that even if that's not necessarily a panacea for the entire issue, more housing supply cannot be anything less than productive. And I'm curious what your perspective on what we could do instead of more supply.
Absolutely. So without getting into a back and forth, I'd be happy to discuss it with you afterwards. But we've actually issued several thousand planning permits. The completion rate is often down to other factors. There are many, many permits that haven't led to building completions. That's not within the control of council, unfortunately, at the moment. That's often driven by market economics. Happy to chat with you afterwards.
On that point, I would point out that many councils outside of the inner city have had far greater success, it seems, in building much greater housing stock, and I would be curious as to what about Burundara is so difficult, and for me it cannot be anything other than the policies of the council that make that difference.
Thank you very much. We have exhausted, Councillor Sinfield.
I was just going to raise a point of order, Chair, that it was question time, and I thought you might like to regain some control.
It's all right. I think the questions were appropriate, otherwise I would have terminated it. Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Thank you, Mr. Danino. If you just return to your seat in the gallery. We'll now move to Christina Brannigan. Thanks very much.
Good evening, everyone. Shall I begin?
Please do.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Christina Brannigan. I live in Camberwell. I'm speaking tonight. I'm wanting to support very much the recommendations and the officer's report in terms of its proposals around the heritage overlay. Got a couple of question marks about a couple of specific HO areas, but just to summarise, really want to thank the officers in particular for all of their work. We know it's been a very difficult time this last, going on for a year now. And I do think that I'm representing the Burundara Heritage Group tonight too, and we do wholeheartedly support the work you've been doing to try and exclude heritage areas from some of these plans. We put in a submission late last night ourselves. We have been speaking to people in the heritage world as much as we can, to the various bodies, and we are getting a sense too that we believe that there are some aspects perhaps of the implications of some of these plans perhaps that people at DTP don't quite understand. Some of the officers may not quite agree, but we are starting to hear some of that sort of feedback. Having had a look at the maps of all the other heritage areas and the other activity centres that have been announced, it's quite obvious, we believe, that there's been no place planning, I think it was, Mr. Windare described it as no planning, place-based approach to planning. Really, our area is the one that's got the vastly most significant amount of heritage that's been dumped without any real consideration for how to look after it. And to speak to some of the points raised earlier, I mean, I think it's quite evident that this council hasn't frivolously protected masses and masses of heritage that it shouldn't done. It's actually just history that has meant that we've got so much of Melbourne's heritage here. There are about 170,000 heritage places protected in their local heritage overlays across Victoria. I understand that there are nearly 3 million homes in Victoria at the moment. 2 million of them are standalone houses, as far as I can see from government data. So if we think about even just that 170,000 places protected in the heritage overlay, even if they were all houses, which of course they're not, there are parks and churches and public buildings, we're looking at less than 6% of the housing stock being in a heritage, some kind of heritage protection. And really, if we compare ourselves to equivalent places around the world, that is not a high proportion, no matter what some people must say. We actually have got such a lot of world-class heritage here. It's just history that's meant we've got it and we're taking care of it. I would hope that we might be able to discuss with Council at some point Auburn Village, because we are concerned about perhaps the thinking that that can take medium to high density. We do think that's potentially an area perhaps that should be looked at.
Ms. Brannigan, can you move to rapid? Thanks very much.
And potentially have more significance than is realised, perhaps even should be on the BHR. And concerned a little bit about some mention of Violet Grove, which of course is an area at the moment that Council had been seeking to protect as a precinct. Anyway, just want to say thank you for your work, and we'll continue to try and support what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions of Ms. Brannigan? There are not. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. I now call upon Liz Burton.
Good evening, councillors and officers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm very brief. The matters that I'm wanting to raise relate to the level of density.
Can I just ask you to, even though we know you, if you could introduce yourself and your suburb, thank you.
Liz Burton, Camberwell.
Thank you.
The matter that I wish to raise relates to existing densities in the affected areas. Hawthorn, for example, at the 2021 census has a density of 78% of medium and high density housing. The area of Glen Ferry, the ward, has 73%. Now, these are regarded as medium and high density housing levels. They compare, for example, with Docklands of 99% and the City of Melbourne at 98%. So the question really is, what is the vision that is being advocated if density levels of 78% are not adequate? Then are we talking about a complete reinterpretation of the concept of suburban living? And if that's the case, then I think that needs to be transparent and declared by the state government that this is a complete reinterpretation of the existing Victorian planning scheme. And I'd like to see that question of density raised with the government in the officer's report, because levels of nearly 80% is already high density. So it seems as if that's already being achieved in Hawthorn, but not recognised. It's not given any recognition. And secondly, I think that the heights that are being advocated of up to 16 stories, now that's massive. You know, the extent of overshadowing is going to be really high, and in Europe, you're looking at about 5 or 6 stories as common in the suburbs. So why should we be accepting 16 and 12 stories in a suburb? And I think there should be a backlash about it, because it's completely unacceptable. And the lifestyles will be heavily compromised. So thank you. They're the matters that I wish to raise.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Besson, for your presentation. When you touched on the 78%, you were focusing on Burundara, is that correct? at the current
I was
level?
talking about Hawthorn in particular.
Just Hawthorn, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Specific suburb, thank
It's
you.
from the 2021 census.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify
Sure.
it was just one suburb. And the other question is, do you know if that figure included existing planning permit approvals that developers have not built yet, or was that just based on current construction that's already established?
The latter, yes,
Right,
that's right. Yeah,
right.
no, it doesn't include applications or
Or what
approvals.
has been
That's
approved
right.
that has
That's
not
correct.
been built? Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Thank you for clarifying
Sure,
that.
thank you.
Thank you, Ms Burton. That seems to have exhausted questions. Call upon Jane Oldham to come forward and join us. Thank you. Again, if you could just start with your name and suburb, thanks.
Good evening, Jane Oldham, Camberwell, speaking
Yep.
tonight on behalf of the Burundara Community Group. And I'm speaking in support of the officer's recommendations. First, on behalf of the group, I would like to thank the officers for the report and the work in progress submission. Both are monumental pieces of work delivered within extremely aggressive timeframes. The candour of the observations, the strength of the feedback and the asks were very welcome and fully supported. The decision to include documents that the DTP wished to keep secret from the community is applauded. They were essential to understanding Council's work. Frankly, it's hard to see why they were ever considered confidential. The DTP's decision to withhold them was a failure of transparency and a missed opportunity for more informed community feedback. BCG's submission to the DTP also called for more transparency, genuine collaboration between the DTP and councils, and genuine community participation in planning, as well as a real commitment to delivering affordable and public housing. We share Council's concern that Recommendation 6 of the VPP inquiry to improve consultation methods has not yet been acted upon. Community feedback was that 16 stories at all 4 activity centres was too high in every location. Concern that heights at the Auburn shops were unacceptable, given the unique and heritage values of the Beswick shops, was acute. I'd like to acknowledge, councillors, the efforts made to raise community awareness since the last UPDC meeting, including the Blue T-shirt Brigade and the online forum. These have helped respond to the low levels of awareness and the community's thirst for clear information from Council. We also thank councillors for the resources invested in analysing plans and the case for an improved program and the conceptual work behind the alternative growth strategy. Should that strategy progress, we ask that early high-level community input be built into its development. While we're pleased Council has demonstrated that heritage precincts can be excluded from new growth areas, BCG remains opposed to the concept of walkable catchments. Although it's early days, there is concern in the alternate proposal about some of the proposed heights along Burwood Road and possibly in Kew, which warrant further community discussion. Finally, the government's proposals present a program for building apartments, not a vision for how people will live in the cores, in the catchments or in a denser, hotter environment. Melbourne, Burundara.
Ms Oldham, could you move towards wrapping up? Thanks very much.
Our residents deserve better, planning for how we live, not just where we live. The government may believe people will simply accept that way of living, but this should not become Victoria's vision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It doesn't appear that we have any questions this evening. Thank you very much. Sally Gluyas, would you come forward? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Sally Gluyas. Thank you for having me again, and I'll be very brief, given what the previous speakers have said. First, I would like to echo Jane's point. We owe a debt of gratitude to Charles and to Scott for the report that has been tabled. I have read all 240 pages. It is a magnum opus. Thank you very much. One point I would like to highlight out of the report, and the community thanks you for highlighting this, Charles, is the consultation was inadequate in all areas, and as you described it, it was structural gaslighting, and the community was delighted for you to support our views on the inadequacy of the consultation. Turning to the draft officer's report, which I know is a work in progress, and you have 4 more sleepless nights to get it finished. There are some concerns I would just like to raise at a granular level regarding heights and your proposed heights. We understand that you have decreased the heights from what the DTP is proposing, and we are thankful for that, but there are some specific concerns. I can't speak on behalf of all residents, but I would like to raise some areas where we feel that you still have not got it right. One is the height of 12 stories at Hawthorn Station. The topography is very low, it's in a hollow. We don't think that's right. I don't know whether there's any residents here from Manningtree Road. The heights along Burwood Road we still think are too high and will overshadow the homes on the north side of Burwood Road. The third one is Glenferrie Road itself. There's been residents there. I think you may have had a submission from them, about 70 residents, about what they think for Glenferrie Road. I won't speak on their behalf, but I think 8 stories in certain parts of Glenferrie Road is too high, and they were looking for a uniform approach there. The final point I'll make, and then I'll wrap up, is Auburn Village. I echo what Christina and Jane have said. There hasn't been enough looking at the historic John Beswick site there. It would be good if it was on some Victorian register. I think your proposal is good that you've brought it down to 6. I would advocate for that particular part of the historic strip there. Just in closing, I do think that the officers have done an amazing job for this. I do think the councillors themselves that have been out on the streets, Sophie, have done a great job. And thank you very much for listening to the community once again.
Thank you. If you just retain your seat, let's check if councillors, are there any questions of this speaker? There are none. Thanks very much. Mary Ann Johnston.
Good evening. It's Marianne Johnston, Hawthorn, resident of Hawthorn and the Riversdale ward.
Thank you.
And apologies, I'll be reading this from my phone and I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. Firstly, I want to thank the Council for its submission to the Activity Centre Phase 2 consultation. The time it must have taken to prepare the document and your willingness to represent responsible planning and genuine community concerns are not only commendable, but also vital to Burundara's future. However, given the controversy surrounding proposed increases in building heights and recognising that high-rise developments remain among the most expensive forms of new housing, I believe it's essential that further community consultation takes place on this issue. However, that said, let me briefly share my own experience with the consultation process. After 48 years of living in Burundara, mostly 25 in Kew and 23 in Hawthorn, I have a deep connection to this area. Unfortunately, my attempts to engage with the Department of Transport and Planning have been frustrating to say the least. Staff seem dismissive and poorly informed, showing little understanding of the real impact these activity centres could have on residents and our environment. Participation in the community reference group proved a complete waste of time. Residents were sidelined, even shown the door at the Hawthorn Town Hall when we attempted to provide genuine feedback. It was more than disheartening. After almost 5 decades in the area and recent investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars in a home renovation, including solar panels, to be told by a planner fresh out of university that everyone has to accept change, all while a significant parliamentary inquiry report critical of these plans was ignored. Such conduct is disgraceful to ratepayers and to voters, erodes confidence and destroys trust in public institutions. There is also a concerning spread of misinformation. Issues like heritage overlays, infrastructure capacity, and green space preservation haven't been addressed transparently. The department's social media is full of misleading and patronising messages, and requests for corrections go unanswered. The council's description of some of this content as structural gaslighting genuinely resonates. On top of this, media bias is rampant. Sensible reformers are labelled NIMBYs, and one major newspaper even misrepresented demographic data for our area, with one article suggesting a decline in population is occurring, which isn't true, while we resist development. Efforts to correct such narratives are routinely ignored. In closing, I hope the Department of Transport and Planning will acknowledge the Council's submission with the respect it deserves. We need continued advocacy of this nature, advocacy that exposes the flaws of the state-led Activity Centre program and ensures the expertise of councils and the voices of residents are heard. While debate over building height continues, the latest submission gives hope that more truth about these reforms will finally come to light.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions of this submitted tonight? There are none. Thank you very much for your presentation. I call upon Peter Campbell to come forward and join us. Thank you. As you know, Peter, if you could start with your name and your suburb, that'd be great.
Peter Campbell, I am from Surrey Hills, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Boroondara Bicycle Users Group. Thanks for the opportunity to present, councillors, and thanks also for the council officers for providing a comprehensive report. So we support the officers' recommendation. I'd make one observation under the key advocacy points. I'd like to see one added, if there's any opportunity for further amendments, for sustainable transport options to be a top-level consideration. So our view is that the State Government Activity Centre plans do not adequately consider sustainable transport, including shared paths for walkers, bikes and other forms of wheeled mobility, including wheelchairs, mobility scooters, etc., and kids on scooters. We're pleased that the Hawthorn to Box Hill Trail is mentioned in attachment 4.1.8, page 45, under movement cycling. So very pleased to see the council advocating to state government for the state government designated strategic cycling corridor, the Hawthorn to Box Hill Trail, to be built. And the point we would make is that this will connect up several of these activity centres where currently there's no provision for that in state government plans. So that includes Hawthorn, Glenferrie, Auburn, Camberwell, and the Kew Railway Line Trail, if that's provided for with part of the development of the Vic Road site and the California Insight, that will provide an active transport connection and small areas of park to Kew Junction, where currently there's no facility for that. It's not safe really to cycle there in any shape or form. So the benefits of this form of transport for walking and cycling is reduced car use, reduced pollution, reduced parking requirements, and healthy communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Campbell, for your presentation. When you suggested the motion includes sustainable transport, were you implying advocate to the state government to provide funding for infrastructure of more active transport?
Well, yeah, I think it's advocating to the state government to adequately provide sustainable transport. So not expecting council to do it, but it's pretty much it's not a priority in state government plans or the community consultation. The focus seems to be on housing stock, and place and planning are secondary considerations, and transport, active transport seems to be a distant consideration.
Thank you. If I might, just a quick follow-up. Through the Burundara Bicycle User Group, have you been involved in any advocacy to the state government for encouraging funding towards sustainable and active transport?
Yes, we've requested $10 million to be allocated for the planning and hopefully construction of the Hawthorn to Box Hill Trail. We've also had members involved in the community consultations that state government conducted for these activity centres, and several people have made submissions online as well, asking them to include that. And I note, initially there was no mention of it, and now there is some mention of it, but it's certainly not being given the right level of attention from our perspective.
My final question, I promise. Have you received a response to that request for funding?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Campbell. Thanks for coming along and representing your bicycle user group. I'm just looking at page 14 and just wondering if we've covered it sufficiently, and we will take on, sure the officers will take on your comments. We've got new links and connections, identify opportunities to improve overall connectivity, permeability and public amenity. And then a little later we've got more discussion about infrastructure investment. So it's always a big topic. I'm trying to get the balance on the report, but I guess it's a comment rather than a question. But
look, there is mention in several places of sustainable transport, including the Hawthorn to Box Hill Trail. So I'm not criticising the body of the report. I'm just saying at the top level there, I'd like to see sustainable transport as a key advocacy point.
Yeah, okay, good clarity, thank you.
Mr Campbell, that appears to have exhausted questions. Thanks for your presentation this evening.
Thank you.
We will now return to officers for matters arising.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the people who have come and reflected on the work of my team. Thank you for acknowledging me, but it's really the team that has done this amazing work. I think the feedback that we've had tonight just demonstrates the complexity of planning and the complexity of dealing with some of the big issues that this municipality and this city faces in terms of housing affordability and indeed the climate issues. I'm not going to go to all the issues, but I will just highlight that while our submission does suggest some changes to the proposal from the government, it also suggests, puts forward some additions, including very robust sustainability controls embedded through this tool, which aren't being embedded through other tools by the state government, specifics on affordable housing so that that is an outcome of this rather than just more housing. And there are certainly some challenges with balancing heights and densities in these areas and interfaces. And while I appreciate that different people have different perspectives on this, I think one of the challenges that the community may have faced is that they received maps which showed heights across whole sites up to boundaries, and the planning controls are actually a lot more nuanced than that, with setbacks and other transitional provisions. So we have sought to take those into account in putting forward the submission. Happy to take any questions.
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Window, for your summary of presenter questions and queries. I was particularly interested in the data that Ms Burton provided with regard to the 78% density level recorded for Hawthorn. And the question I asked was, that's based on current existing structures. Are you able to speculate or potentially provide some intel at a later date of if the approved planning applications that we currently have in our system were actioned by the developers and built, do you know approximately what density level that would then bring Hawthorn to? Because I know there's a lot of developments that haven't been acted on.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Look, certainly happy to take those that information away, those statistics away, and investigate a little bit further about what they mean and how they compare across Melbourne. And certainly we have a lot, about 90%, not quite 90% of multi-unit development permits that have been approved in the last 5 years have not been built. So there is a lot more approvals than are being built. I don't have the information on what would happen to those percentages if all those were built, but certainly just as an overarching exercise, we'll have a look at those and come back to you.
Thank you. And if I may, a very quick follow-up. Are you able to provide just a brief summary of why it's Council's opinion these developments are not proceeding? Or feedback from developers of why they're not proceeding?
How long's a piece of string, I guess. There are multiple reasons why developments don't proceed. Some it is the motivations of the applicants, where they are actually seeking to get an approval with no intention of developing because they're seeking to get a value uplift by having an approval. And in many other cases, it's because the developments are not feasible. So the cost of land and construction is too high to be returned through the price that the market is willing to pay for that product. And fundamentally, that is the problem that we have at the moment. It also, is a constant issue with the idea that planning controls suddenly lead to supply. They certainly, these proposed planning controls, be it the government's or what we have proposed, will provide more capacity for development, but there's nothing to say that they will deliver more development. That's certainly up to the market.
Thank you.
Councillor Torney.
Sorry, I might just add to that, and perhaps it's worth reflecting on many development applications for multi-level mixed-use and apartment developments that in fact have come through this chamber over the last 3 years. Many of those, prior to the changes that have occurred at Camberwell, or even the proposed changes at Hawthorn and Glenferrie, and I think every single one of those that has been in the activity centres that's been approved has not been built. There's not been one of them that's been through this chamber. And we've had applicants, we've had proponents sit in this chamber and indicate to you as a council group that should they get a permit, they'll be building it, and it actually hasn't happened. So there's lots and lots of other factors that are influencing it. It's not the planning permits and approvals in themselves.
Councillor Torney.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I understand there's a lot of similar work going on in New South Wales and Sydney with changes to planning scheme. And I understand that in the case in Sydney that there's heritage is explicitly mentioned and excluded potentially from the walkable, their version of a walkable catchment. Is that the case? Can you explain that, or do you know?
Again, through yourself, Chair, that's our understanding. We have had a little bit of a look at this in the past, and our understanding is that heritage areas or identified heritage locations are excluded from the walkable catchments or the similar version of the walkable catchments that's up to 800 metres around key nodal points or activity centres and train stations in Sydney. However, it is a different system in Sydney as well in terms of development applications and the way that they're considered. But our understanding is that there is a difference of approach in terms of heritage areas.
Can I follow-up question? When you say it's a different system, I don't know if you can explain very simply what that means to the layperson, but heritage is excluded whatever the system is, in terms of you cannot, whatever the zone change is, heritage is still protected? Or is
I'm not sure I can be quite that explicit to say that in all cases that heritage is excluded from supported or facilitated development outcomes. So I can't be quite that explicit, but in terms of that principle, my understanding is that the walkable catchments have not been applied in heritage areas as a principle.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'd like to pick up on just a couple of comments raised by our submitters tonight, Ms Burton and Ms Gluyas, in particular density and height limits. I think the density question's been well raised by Councillor Hollingsworth, so I feel perhaps the answer's already been given on that. But I would like to ask whether you feel that question of density of existing suburbs with a high degree of density already has been adequately addressed in the report or highlighted, and I'd just ask the question as to whether that point has been made well enough in your opinion, or if there is an opportunity to do a little bit more there. And the second question, or second part of the question, is in relation to height limits. A number of examples were raised by Ms Gluyas regarding 12 stories in Hawthorn, Burwood Road, Glenfair Road, and importantly in Auburn Road. And I just wondered if you'd be happy to comment on your opinion about those height limits there and whether there might be an opportunity to reconsider, particularly the height limit that we have proposed for Auburn Village and the Beswick projects, the Beswick buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. We will certainly have a look at that information about the density of existing suburbs, but the basis of this submission is to identify what we believe is an appropriate built form outcome that is place-specific and context-based, using good urban design principles and recognising that the city is changing and that Boroondara has to accommodate 65,500 more dwellings. That is in our planning scheme as our target. So we wouldn't be specifically planning on the basis of a proportion of dwellings to be high density. We would be looking more at what is appropriate built form in the context, and certainly based on what we've put in our submission, it will be slightly less high density than what the state government is proposing. In terms of height limits, I reinforce that height is only one of multiple development controls. We have done some testing, not of every site, of certain sites, to form a view about what is appropriate in those areas. And so, for example, Burwood Road, it does come down to overshadowing, and the difference between 16 stories and 8 stories is getting sun to the southern footpath, and then obviously addressing the residents to the south. In terms of heritage areas, we have had some advice from our own heritage consultant looking at what would be appropriate in these areas. I would say it hasn't gone down to the lot-by-lot exercise, so the specifics of certain buildings in Auburn are not addressed, but there would still be, under the controls, an assessment under the heritage overlay for those buildings. So the built form overlay has a specific relationship with the heritage overlay. So we certainly take on board what's been said, and I think there is a diagram in the submission which goes to the challenge of setting simple height limits. There's an image, and it is site testing. It is not specific to what we're proposing, that shows an 8-storey building and another version on the same lot, which is mostly 4 storeys and a 12-storey, and they deliver the same amount of housing capacity. So it goes to the multitude of planning controls that have to come together.
Councillor Tourney.
Oh, Chair, just when the time's right, foreshadowing, I'd like to move a motion.
Thanks very much. Councillor Nolan.
I'd like to foreshadow, I'd like to make an amendment to the motion on the screen, which would include recognition that we need to build a more livable city outside of some of these activity centres. We're very poorly invested in public transport upgrades, particularly buses. And I've noted that one of the comments in the report is that Kew doesn't have a train line, therefore, et cetera, but there's no mention of buses. So I'd like to...
Councillor Nolan, is there a question in this, or are you proposing amendments to a motion?
I'm proposing an amendment to the motion.
There's no motion yet to amend.
Okay. I'll foreshadow.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. There doesn't appear to be any further questions tonight, so we'll move forward to the next and exciting instalment of the item. We're now in search of a motion, and Councillor Tourney, you indicated that you'd be very pleased to move one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Do we have a seconder before we can discuss it? Councillor Hollingsworth, are
very
you
happy to
happy to second? That's fine. Okay.
I am happy to discuss Councillor Nolan's. What's your suggestion?
My suggestion...
Is there any opposition at this point in time? Are you actually opposing or just amendment, Councillor Nolan? Can I just test the chamber and see if there's any opposition to the motion? Understanding that we're now going to listen to an amendment. Is there any opposition in the chamber to the motion as proposed? There doesn't appear to be. Okay. So prior to Councillor Tourney, you presenting your case, you've suggested that Councillor Nolan can have a chat to us about the amendment first, and that'll be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor Tourney. Just listening to a couple of the speakers and noting in the report quite a bit of feedback which ties into our Burundara community plan about moving around and our strategic priorities. I'd like to make an amendment to add one point, which would be to prioritising public transport and active transport improvements.
Councillor Tourney, would you be happy to accept that amendment in what you're proposing? Or would you like more detail?
I'm reluctant to add a huge amount. There's already a list of advocacy, and I'm aware of trying to keep the advocacy clear and strong, and wondering if we reserve that for another type of report. That this is focusing on housing and affordability, and that we could look at transport, active transport and public transport as a separate advocacy piece, and keep the planners focused on what's at hand. But I am open to being persuaded, Councillor Nolan. But my feeling is to keep this simple and focused on the report.
Councillor Tourney, I'd suggest the officers might like to make a brief comment on that.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Through yourself. The point E is housing growth enabled by new and enhanced infrastructure and amenity. And there are certainly ongoing and will be further discussions and input to the infrastructure plans that will be considered as part of the activity centres. As part of those infrastructure plans, public transport and active transport will be key advocacy points. So it certainly is covered within our submission and will be part of further and future advocacy, really embedded in that point E that supports infrastructure with housing.
Councillor Nolan, do you think that might satisfy your concerns?
Oh, look, taking on board Mayor Tawney's comments and Mr Walker's comments here, keen not to see that lost, but in the interests of the focus tonight, I'm happy to leave that for another day.
Thank you. Councillor Tawney, we'll throw back to you. Would you like to discuss your motion? Thank you.
I would, thank you, and I'll try and keep it to 5 minutes. I do have a lot to say. So this is a consultation, and these are our views and the views of our community. And I really hope the state government is genuinely listening, because people deserve to have a say in their communities. Councils like Yarra and Melbourne are trusted to get on with place-based planning, and it's time to trust Boroondara, Stonington and others to do the same. We've said it from the start, we support housing growth. We've done the work, we know our neighbourhoods, and we know how to grow well with local context, character and community support, and we're delivering results. Our own Camberwell Structure and Place Plan, adopted by the state government as the core for the Camberwell Activity Centre, provides for 13,000 new dwellings. This is about growing well. That means affordable housing, good design, strong environmental standards and infrastructure that actually works. That's how you build a livable city. We've heard that from our planners, not by changing the rules against advice from local planners and hoping for the best. Which raises the question, why the rush? Council planning isn't the problem for housing. We've approved more than 2,000 new dwellings in Boroondara since 2019, and only 14% have been constructed. Across Victoria, there are 120,000 approved dwellings not developed. Planning is not the issue. And these reforms will drive decade-long changes. So it's critical that state government takes a breath and takes the time to get them right. Even New South Wales, leading nationally on housing delivery, has explicitly excluded heritage areas from its density program, and Victoria should do the same. Right now, we're seeing heritage streets drawn into 6-storey zones, tree canopies under threat, and environment standards gone missing. But these details are important, and these mistakes will take decades to undo. Our own structure plans already show we can meet housing targets without destroying heritage or trees, and over the past 30 years, Boroondara has grown by 40,000 people, and we still have heritage and trees. So why doesn't the government trust us to continue delivering this growth? And despite all the talk, there's no clear way to deliver affordable housing through the state government's plans, and that can be fixed easily with clear, inclusionary requirements for new developments and flexibility for councils to negotiate local outcomes. Affordability can't be left to chance or market goodwill. It must be established that at least 10% of each build is for affordable housing. We all want more homes. We all want a fairer, more livable city. If this is to be a true collaboration, then pens down. Let's do it properly with evidence, transparency and genuine partnership. Let councils lead and trust our experience and track record. Councils aren't the obstacle, we're part of the solution and we're ready to get this right. I commend this report to my fellow councillors.
Well done, Councillor. You're under 5 minutes. Would you like another minute? As this is not opposed tonight, Councillor Hollingsworth, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. If I could take the Mayor's spare 1 minute, that would be wonderful. Listening to the Mayor's comments and also to the officers' feedback, it is so important to demonstrate to our community that it is not Burundara Council impeding planning permit applications, and that's clearly been evidenced tonight. I'm mindful of the comments from Miss Marianne Johnston, who I don't recall seeing present in the chamber before, but she spoke from the heart as a long-term Hawthorn resident, and she used the term gaslighting, and that disturbs me because if there is a negative narrative out there that doesn't reflect City of Burundara's core ethic, compliance and support for planning projects and planning permits, when we've sat in this chamber month after month after month and approved applications and worked with developers and encouraged them to proceed, acknowledging that there is a need for additional housing and well-considered planning reform. So thank you, Mayor, for your comments, and thank you to the gallery for coming and presenting tonight, and council officers and councillors. And I just wanted to foreshadow in general business, there is one item I'd like to raise with regard to Trans 2. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Unless anyone's got any madly pressing things, I think it's appropriate we move straight forward now to put this motion. I now put it. Those in favour? No one against. I declare the motion carried. Thanks very much. Just moving to details at the end, general business, and I remind you that the comments tonight on general business need to be limited to do with UPDC. I've been specifically asked that we move in that direction. So, Councillor Hollingsworth, you've foreshadowed something for general business. Is it related to UPDC?
Definitely is, and it's just related to the tranche 2 of the planning reforms where the community consultation has opened today, and I just wanted to ask a question of the officers in relation to that, or put forward a request.
This is specifically not to do with tranche 2 tonight. Can it wait?
It can wait. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Urgent business, are there any matters of urgent business? There are none. Confidential business, there are none. Before I close this meeting, I want to thank all who have joined us this evening, both within the chamber and on YouTube, and I declare the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting closed. Thank you very much.